Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Education's special board meeting. And we will now call our meeting to order. Dr. Flores, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure. Would everyone please stand? Place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 1.3, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly second. Dr. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Tillman? No, he's there.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Dr. Hill?
Aye.
Mr. Gallo? Ms. Rosales Medina?
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt?
Aye.
And Gwen Rogers, aye. Thank you. Motion carried. We will now enter into 2.0 closed session. Are there any closed session comments? Hearing none, then we are now going to go into closed session. We will return shortly, hopefully. All right, everyone log out.
Okay, Gwen's place.
I don't hear anybody, and I don't see other than you, Danny, on the screen. So
I
I'm
see
sure.
everybody. Gwen left and Mike appeared, so I got kind of worried.
Yeah, that is kind of scary.
Barbara and I got lost, but we're here.
Okay. Maybe she's in the Twilight Zone.
We were the only two in the room, and I said we need to log out, and it's
She's
still
on her way
said.
back.
I got
Okay.
lost in the
There we
other meeting. Okay, I'm back.
Oh, I
Thank
didn't know Gwen was lost. I thought it was
saw you.
Barbara and me.
Dr. Hill and I were in the other one.
Yeah, I saw her and I said, hey, we're in the wrong meeting. Thank you so much. We have returned back to our special board meeting, and we thank you again for being here for the Board of Education special meeting, and we hope that you are able to capture a lot of information from this meeting as well. So we are now at 2.1. Oh, let me see. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we're not. We're at 3.1, and it's our middle school principal, correct?
Oh, readout.
And I have a readout for you. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approve the appointment of the following employees: Maynard Jacqueline, middle school principal; Devalejo, effective date, work, year, and salary to be determined, funding 035; Freeman Aaron, middle school principal; Serrano, effective date, work, year, and salary to be determined, funding 035.
So move to approve.
Second,
It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. Dr. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Tillman,
Aye.
Dr. Hill,
aye.
Mr. Gallo,
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina,
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt,
Aye.
Gwen Rogers, aye. Thank you so much. And I know we are in virtual world, but we want to congratulate both of our new principals. We know you will do a great job. We're so excited. We can't wait to see you personally. Dr. Volkmer, did you have any other comments?
No, the board, thank you for the approval. We're just very excited about these two members of our team coming on board as principals. We have absolutely complete confidence in them, know they're going to do a great job leading their staffs to better academic outcomes and great things for kids. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, 4.0, 4.1, as we move, I'm opening the public hearing. 4.1, annual service plan and budget for 2020-2021 special education.
And President Rogers, Dr. Menorez does have a few comments.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. We've actually invited Nereida Gutierrez, our Assistant Director for our Special Education Programs and our SELPA, to just share briefly with the board the purpose of the SELPA plan.
thank you.
Okay. Good evening, President Rogers, Interim Superintendent Dr. Volkermer, members of the board and cabinet. I'm Nereida Gutierrez, your Assistant Director of Special Education, and I'm here to present to you the SELPA Annual Budget and Service Plan. Annually, a special education local plan is required to submit a local plan to the California Department of Education for approval. The plan has two primary functions, which is to assure access to our special education and related services for our students residing within the geographic areas served by the plan, and assuring compliance with all federal and state laws, codes, statutes, and regulations. So we have two sections that have been presented to you. We have Section D, the annual budget plan, that includes the projected special education budget funding, projected revenues and expenditures as allowed by IDEA. And we have Section E, which is the annual service plan that identifies the full continuum of service options provided within the SELPA. Both sections have been posted. Section D, the annual budget, and Section E, service. I do need to verbally update and make a correction for Section D. When you're looking at Table 2, our total expenditures are now $118,103,000 $685.73. Those are total expenses. Then on table 3, which is our total revenue, the correction is now $118,106,189.73. And that is the updated correction for sections D, total expenditures and total revenue.
All right. Dr. Menards, is there anything else?
No, board, just to recognize that there is that slight difference in the expenditure and the revenue, then was what was posted in the public, for the public hearing. And so we need that captured in our minutes, as well as that's what the board is approving tonight.
All right, board, I will now call for the vote.
Well, do we?
We're voting on this. It's my understanding that we're voting on this, correct?
Correct. There's a
We need a
resolution.
motion, Madam President.
I'm sorry.
We need a motion.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
move. Do you want to do it, Mr. Gallo?
No, that's okay. I'll second. I'll
Okay.
second you.
Okay, all right. I move to approve
Okay.
preliminary budget for us.
All right. Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion?
Well, I thought do we not open a public hearing? That's what I thought I saw on the agenda. But
I did. I opened it. You just couldn't hear me bang over here?
no, but did we ask for any comments or this or that? I mean,
I
we
didn't
just
get
opened and closed it, or what are we
didn't
doing?
Were
There
there,
were no public comments for this hearing.
Okay. So do we close the public hearing and then vote and stuff? I mean, I always thought the procedure was
well, all
you
of them,
conduct the public hearing, then you close the public hearing, and then we make a motion and vote. So,
it's my understanding we're gonna, 2 and 3 doesn't require a vote, correct, Karen? But 4 and 5 does, and they're all under public hearing. So
okay.
you want to go through them all? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Gallo?
No, I thought we were on item 4.1 and,
We are, but I heard that there's,
okay, so,
all of them are not requiring a vote, but I can go through all of them. 4.1 is, 2 and 3 is not under this public hearing. And then 4 and 5 is going to require a vote. Correct, Karen? Is that,
I think the procedure, the part that Mike is talking about, when we're past it, normally when you do a public hearing, it'll be announced, this is to open the public hearing. And then Ms. Gutierrez would have did her presentation. You would ask there's comments from the public. If not, you would close the open the public hearing, and then we would entertain a motion.
okay, so I did open the hearing. I don't think you probably heard me, but I did open it and banged with my over here.
yes, I heard that.
So I will move forward with 4.2. We'll go through all of them and then close, correct?
President Rogers, no, I think what he's wanting you to do is close each item.
That's
Okay.
right.
And close this one,
Yeah.
vote it, then open the public hearing for the
Okay.
next one and so on.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we should do. And then
Okay.
if there's required action, you take it after you close the public hearing.
Okay,
Right.
so I'm going to close the public hearing on 4.1.
Okay.
Okay, and then 4.2. We're moving,
No, take the
No,
vote.
Now,
on this one first.
don't we have a vote now? We can
sorry.
redo our motion.
I'll
and-
make a motion to
okay,
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll second it again.
All right, I move to approve the annual service
Okay.
plan and budget
thank you.
for 2020-21 special.
Then I'll second again.
Okay, we've been moved and second. Now we'll call for the vote for 4.1, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go back. Mr. Tillman,
Aye.
Dr. Hill. You're on
Aye.
mute. Dr. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Gallo,
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina,
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt,
Aye.
Gwen Rogers, aye. Motion carried. All right, we will open on 4.2, open our public hearing, and that's balances in excess of minimum reserve requirement fiscal year 2019-20.
President Rogers, there are no public comments for this item.
Okay. All right, there are no comments, board.
I got a quick, so what is is this the actual budget we're doing?
No. No, Mr. Tillman, the budget is actually 4.3. Janie, could you give an explanation of 4.2?
Yes, so if you'll recall several years ago, the new under Ed Code, if a district has any funds beyond their minimum required, you have to have a special public hearing on it. And so this shows that we project we'll have 15 million above the minimum reserve when we end this year out. So it's required under Ed Code.
And do you have to adjust after the unaudited actuals?
No, I don't. We never adjust, but all of that is then approved by the board when we bring the unaudited forward. But I can find out. I don't recall us doing that.
And since it's on here, I'll ask the question now, because I'm confused about this projected remaining unassigned balance to a substantiate need. I don't know what that means.
So in our budget presentation, you'll show that we have it set aside for our future deficit. So when we reserve certain amounts, this is the language required under Ed Code section 42127, is that you show how much is the 2%. And then what is beyond that 2%. And it's just the wording that's required. Okay. And then we'll show it to you in the multi-year as provided for future deficit spending or PDS.
Madam President, this is Dr. Flores. I want to ask Janie, what, are you done? Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think Mr. Tillman is done.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And then, board, don't forget to put the comments in.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead and finish, Ms. Christakis.
Yeah, so it's just required under Ed Code. This is the format of the wording that we have to use. When we get to the multi-year, you'll see, when we reserve amounts in excess of the 2%, we always say what it's reserved for. And we don't use this term, we use it for, well, you see where she has it for deficit spending and board priorities. And those could include the physically distant schooling as we move into this next year. We have it helping us get through the next year with our budget.
And this would have been here, whether it's the budget you thought about that we think we're going to have as of today versus the one that had all the $97 million in cuts?
So the reason, yes, Mr. Tillman, that's a great question. So the reason we have that, remember, we closed school early, and so we had some additional savings. And so because of the early closure, it's a little bit higher than we anticipated.
Which leads me to my next question. All that money from COVID-19, does it get booked into this year's budget or next year's?
All the one-time dollars that we're getting, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, is it going to be in the
next year? Yeah, next year.
So none of it's going to be booked in 19-20 school year budget?
No, it's not until next year when we get the money, and so we're booking it next year, and that will be in the presentation as well.
So we haven't received any money for COVID-19 in this year's budget?
That's my understanding, is all as of July.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I do, Madam President.
Okay, Dr. Flores.
So just to clarify, if we want to ask a question, we have to put it in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, and that includes Mr. Tillman?
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. He started talking when nothing was in there. So,
okay.
So
all right, just clarifying, Mr. Tillman.
I thought I was the only one that had a question.
Anyway, so our actual 2%, just to clarify, Janie, is 14,900,000, correct?
For this year, so it's based on your expenditures, yeah.
So we had 15 million. So we had 15 million. So that's an overage, right?
I am looking now for the item. Sorry, I got going to a different window. Yes, for this year, yes. So the 2% is 14.9 and the 15 million above that 2%. Yes.
Okay, so it's just a little bit over, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And that will then go into the
Next year.
general fund, right?
Yeah, it's our ending balance reserved for, as you know, just although we're getting one-time dollars next year, we're still deficit spending because we're not receiving a COLA. Although our position, which we'll talk about in the presentation, is much better than we thought a couple weeks ago.
You know, now that you mentioned that, I thought that I read somewhere, I couldn't go back and find it, that they were not going to take out the COLA, that we were going to get the COLA. I'm going to look for that.
Yeah, that was the Senate version, but the version that we've received information on, that the governor and the legislature agreed upon, does not include a COLA, is the information we have now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that from, who's that from?
Well, we got stuff from school services. We got stuff from Kevin Gordon, from CASBO. There's
Okay.
trailer bill language.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and find where I found where they sent me that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And Mr. Tillman, is that a new question?
It is a new question.
Okay.
Mr. Kostakis, so you don't have to put in the restricted the restricted ending fund balance?
No, but that's in our multi-year.
And
So it's unrestricted, yes.
right. So, and you guys are still saying that you think the ending balance total is going to be $40 million?
So let me go back to the screen. Sorry, I keep toggling out. It was 30. It's 30 almost 2 million that we think we will this year.
Unrestricted. So when you add in, I'm just trying to get an idea. So you're saying when you add in the restricted general fund ending balance, it's going to, at one of the other meetings, you said a lot of this was based on the ending fund balance total of $40 million.
Yeah, we're projecting 44 million. That will be on the presentation on the next item.
All right.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So we will close this item 4.2. We will close this public hearing. And we will move to 4.3. We will now open up the public hearing on 4.3 fiscal year 2020 and 2021 preliminary budget.
President Rogers, we do have a brief presentation for the board. Would you like us to do that before or after public comment?
We could take the public comments if there are some.
I think we do have some, Karen.
We have 3, okay? Okay, the first one is from no name. Point blank, will there be layoffs, pink slips, or bumping for classified staff? I understand the uncertainty of the COVID, but we as loyal employees are standing in limbo, waiting to hear if our jobs are safe or on the chopping block, since so many cuts will become reality. The next one is from Sarah Hernandez. In discussing the budget and any possible cuts, I would like to encourage the board to continue funding the arts. My children are enrolled in band and choir classes. To them, these are the classes they enjoy most and what they care the most about. These classes are what motivate them to try hard in school, and without them, I believe they would lose interest in school altogether. And my last one is from no name. I would like to request that the arts, especially band and choir, not be cut. This seems to be a theme when making cuts, that the arts always get cut. There are many, many students who thrive in the arts, and there are incredible teachers who don't deserve to lose their jobs. I also want to recommend no cuts of employees, classified or certificated. There should be pay decreases across the board. If everyone takes an equal hit, no one should have to lose their jobs. If everyone, including the higher up positions, take a 20% cut, etc., then no one should have to lose their jobs. And that's it for those comments.
Thank you. Dr. Volkemer? Did Dr. Volkemer go away?
He disappeared. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
That's odd.
He just disappeared off the screen.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just told that you didn't quite hear my last comment.
Okay, you want to read it again?
Let me
We
just,
heard it.
Okay, let me find where Dr. Volkermer went. There he is.
yeah.
I heard it.
I was letting Karen know that she came off for a little bit.
Got it.
Really?
Okay. Well, Karen, go ahead just for clarity so we can make sure.
Okay, I'm going to read the last one totally again because I'm not sure where I got lost. She would like to request the arts, especially band and choir, not be cut. This seems to be a theme when making cuts. The arts are always cut. There are many, many students who thrive in the arts, and there are incredible teachers who don't deserve to lose their jobs. I also want to recommend no cuts of employees classified or certificated. There should be pay decreases across the board. If everyone takes an equal hit, no one should have to lose their jobs. If everyone, including the higher up positions, take a 20% pay cut, etc., then no one should have to lose their jobs. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dr. Volkermer, you are back. You've reappeared.
I had a statement, Madam President.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that just a quick response. That's not the norm in our district. Our theme is not to cut music and arts. That's why we have a robust music and arts program, because over the years, even through budget cuts, we make sure that we maintain our music and arts program in San Bernardino City Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman, for that. And it's important for our community to know we are definitely here for our students. So that's great. I see you. So the presentation is going to pop up.
Yes, Janie, while you're pulling that up, board, we are pleased to bring you very good news this evening. We're going to have to do some budget shuffling and cash flow shuffling due to deferrals, but cuts are not in our immediate future. We're very happy to say that. I want to thank, before she starts, I want to thank Janie and her team for being prepared for anything. This is again, good news. At one time, it was pretty bad news, and her team has worked very, very, very hard for us to be able to be prepared for anything. So I want to thank her for that and turn it over to her for the presentation. Thanks, Janie.
Good evening, board. It's so great to bring, as Dr. Volkermer said, some better news, right? Some good news. We were looking at some severe cuts to public education, and it's coming more in the form of deferrals. Certainly it could be better, but considering the circumstances we're in with COVID and everything, we're so grateful that we will be at flat funding. So very thankful for that. So next slide, Daniel. So tonight, you know what, this is our public hearing. Wanted to give you an update, talk a little bit about the state budget agreement, what we know to date. You know, information continues to come out, but we're learning a little more every minute of the day. The impact to our district, our preliminary multi-year projections, and the next steps. So these projections now, Janet, Ms. King, who's worked really, really hard, her and her team, they're wrapping everything up so that you can approve the budget on the June 30th. We know there may be revisions. The state has talked about that in August. And if anything major changes from what we're presenting to you this evening, we will bring those 45-day revisions to you in August as well. Next slide. I see there's a question.
I'm not sure how many slides you have. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause because you've seen that, but I am monitoring it. Mr. Gallo, would you like to go ahead and?
Well, I said it. I'll wait till after the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. So we have chances, you know, we have a state budget right now. Again, some of the information is forthcoming, but we also will know more in August. Remember, our income taxes aren't going to be filed till July, so there's continue to be some budget uncertainty as COVID has, you know, really wreaked havoc on our economy, and, you know, revenue volatility at the state level, which impacts us. And then we will have pretty significant cash deferrals, which we prefer over cuts, but they are a challenge that we face. Implementing physically distanced schooling, increased costs related to COVID. Dr. Menars gave an extensive presentation last week, and there are increased costs related to that. And of course, importantly, the need to mitigate learning loss. Next slide, please. So this is what we know as of today, that there's large deferrals. So they're more than what the governor proposed, about 9.19 billion next year. We have a small deferral at the end of this year of about 1.9 billion. Great news that the proposal holds us harmless for our 1920 ADA. So that is great news. There's no flexibility with the instructional time, but you can use a combination of distance learning to meet the 180 days, a combination of distance learning and in-person. The language in the budget bill of 2021 eliminates the authority to lay off certificated employees by August 15th and prohibits termination of positions in nutrition, transportation, or custodial services. So if you receive less than a 2% COLA, there's language in EDCO that permits a district to move forward with certificated layoffs, and that authority has been removed in the trailer bill language. Next slide. So if you'll recall, last week we had not quite as many deferral money bags, right? So Mr. Cunningham and his team put together this is hot off the press, right? What does this mean to us? And you can see the small deferral in 1920 where we won't receive 50 million until July. And then look at all the deferrals as we move into the following year. So 49.7 million from June of 21 to July, 49.7 million from May to August, 49.7 million from April to September, 49.7 million from March to October, and 24.8 million from February to November. So here's the good news is if we receive more federal dollars, then it's a trigger off, which means there won't be as many deferrals. And so we'll see what happens. Of course, when the state doesn't pay districts, the cost of borrowing money is on the district. And so hopefully we get federal dollars so that these deferrals are reduced. Next slide. So part of our multi-year projection, as you know, you've seen this slide many, many times. We recognize savings from our early school closure. We've limited and reviewed all of our contracts. We continue to evaluate vacancies, and these are things we're going to continue to do through the next year, waiting for our student enrollment to actualize before adding staff, sticking to our staffing ratios. And then Dr. Perez will be leading a budget committee to recommend ongoing reductions as we go into the next fiscal year. So we will have, she showed the board, presented to the board last week, that we will have the board's subcommittee, the budget subcommittee, and we will have budget presentations for the board as we move into first interim, where we will have to identify cuts for the following year. Because we're receiving a lot of one-time dollars this upcoming year, that's really helping us with our budget. Next slide. So here's some of our major assumptions. The flat funding with no COLA and no deficit, thank goodness. We've included 55.4 million in one-time funding. We're expecting that we're declining enrollment of 244 students. Now we will get the prior year, but when we move into 21, 22, that's when that impacts us, and we'll keep you updated on our enrollment as we move into the year. And the great news that we're being held harmless for the 1920 level. We included 19.7 million in reductions that the team has worked on. About half of that, a little more than half of it, was things that were funded with carryover. And then we will be prepared for state budget changes in August and throughout the budget year. Next slide, please. This was the budget that we presented last week, showing how we're going to spend the one-time funding. We have the CARES Act, the coronavirus relief, the GEAR, which is special education funding, for a total of 55.4 million. I wish it was million. And how we will be using the various funding sources to replenish and refresh our devices, our physically distant schooling, and other academic support, and then to help with the budget deficit. Next slide.
So just so I'm clear.
Mr. Tillman, Mr. Gallo is prior. So Janie, I can't see this slide on how many more slides you have yet left.
About, I think 3 or 4.
Okay, I'll stop right here. I'll pause right here. Mr. Gallo, and then I'll go in the order of the questions. Mr. Gallo, you're on mute. You're on mute, Mr. Gallo.
Yeah, if I hear something from Janie, I'd like to see the rest of it. But
Okay.
Let me flip through the charts and see if I see it. Yeah, I guess I really don't, but I got a couple of questions. One is on what are we doing about charters? We got, 5,500 students in charter schools. You're going to tell them to take a 9-month hiatus from receiving any payments. What's the game plan for that? That could put a lot of them out of business.
Yeah, so we don't, this is the state, Mr. Gallo, that's doing this, not the district. So they'll get their property taxes, which isn't enough, right? So they have, we reached out to Kevin Gordon, we've reached out to the County Office of Education, and they have a couple of options that they can borrow on their own. But what we were interested in is how can they borrow as a pool so that they can get low rates. And so they are actually, it looks like they're working on it at the state level. The state treasurer is looking to see how they can put a pool together and working through the county offices for that. And so we will continue to monitor this and see what they're doing, what they're providing for charter schools. This is a big impact for all LEAs, particularly if you have a low property tax revenue, which that's us. So any charter school in San Bernardino would be the same. So we will keep you posted on this. As you can see, those large deferrals begin to happen as we get into next year, mid to late next year. And if we get the federal dollars, those deferrals will be cut in half. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, let's see, mid to next year. Let's see, it looked like payments in February, right?
Start to.
I mean, those are 9 months being deferred, right? That's what I read on this chart.
It's February, March, April, May, and June getting deferred. And like you said, yes, some don't get paid until later the next year. So we're going to learn more, Mr. Gallo, as this was just released. And if the federal funding comes through, the deferrals will be cut in half.
Okay, but let me make sure I understand what you just said. You said February through June are deferred, but that's deferred to September. Is that what I understand? Or did they start up in July, August, September, October, November?
So you'll see
how does that work?
So Mr. Gallo, you'll see that at the top of the chart where June gets paid in July.
Yeah.
And then the next one, May, gets paid in August. And then April gets paid in September. And March gets paid in October. And February and November. It is challenging. And so
February is November, not to June.
Correct.
That's the following 9 months.
That's a smaller deferral. I hear what you're saying. This is hot off the press, right? So we've reached out to our to Kevin Gordon and other groups to see what will be available for those charter schools. And we have a little bit of time right now because it starts up in February around what charter schools will be able to do. So we can continue to inquire and provide information to you.
Okay, then the other question I had was on the 180 days. You're not getting any relief on that. What is the game plan for how you're going to ensure students receive the full 180 days of instruction? Because I mean, I look at what, we say we got an 80-something% participation rate, but we're measuring that once a week. So somebody comes in for an hour once a week and you count as participation. That's not going to cut it in this 180 days compliance requirement. How in the world are we going to meet that?
So I'm going to defer the question, Mr. Gallo. I know there's a team working on that, and we don't have a lot of information from the state yet. Dr. Volkmer?
Oh, yeah. So, Mr. Gallo, two separate things. The 180 days is the minimum number that you have to offer as a school district, and that you'll get paid for from an ADA standpoint. Yeah. So we couldn't say, well, to save money, if let's say the May revise had held, to save money, we only want to offer 165 days. You can't do that by law.
No, I get it.
There's a difference between having to offer 180 days and the quality of what gets offered within that 180 days. And that's what I hear you really asking about in terms of making sure that kids get a robust educational experience. And
yeah, and the quality is one thing. I hear you, and there's varying degrees of that, of course, with the distance learning thing. But how are you going to ensure participation for a full 180 days by a student?
Correct. And that is part of what we're working on for our opening in August. You heard a fairly comprehensive report about that last week. We will be bringing you more information as we solidify negotiations, as we move forward with what our program will actually look like, balancing that against what we're allowed to do, depending upon whether COVID spikes again or not, what program model we can actually use. So we'll be bringing you much more information about that. It is absolutely on our mind. If you heard Dr. Menarz's presentation last week about soft opening, that's absolutely on our mind for those students who kind of checked out on us and we didn't have engagement or contact with them. How do we bring them back up to speed? Very much on our minds. It's a great question.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later tonight, right? Or are we?
Not programmatically, just start date.
Okay, start date, yeah. And maybe we can have a discussion around what that start date means, because I think there's a lot of options for this, and probably multiple flexibility options that we may want to be thinking about, which I'm sure we are.
Great.
Okay, I'll wait till that discussion arises before we get into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Harold.
Mr. Tillman?
Yeah, on the line of questioning that Mr. Gallo had. So in this year that we just left, they relaxed the standards for defining ADA, right?
That's correct. They held us harmless.
Right. And they're not going to do that this upcoming school year?
Yes, they are, Mr. Tillman. So this year, the P2 went through the end of February instead of March because of when we went, because of the school closures.
Right.
And what they're saying is we're going to hold you at the 1920 level for 2021.
And that's the question Mr. Gallo was asking. So Mr. Gallo, it doesn't matter how we structure attendance and who shows up, you're going to get all your funding.
No, I get the funding piece. I'm just looking, I mean, are we still going to have a requirement? I thought I heard Janie say that the requirement is still that students will be required to participate for 180 days. And I'm assuming those are full days.
Well,
now it's separate from the budget. I'm talking about instruction which is the whole point of what we're doing here. How are our students getting an education?
Right.
And are we giving them 180 days of education? Yeah, so I get the funding. The funding, and that's great. That's good. That just gives us the resources to be able to offer, those types of services. But I'm more concerned with ensuring our students actually receive 180 days of full instruction.
Gotcha. Okay. And then to Ms. Christakis, I get confused about the concern about borrowing the money because when I worked in the treasurer's office, we were excited about doing trans. The cost for trans was so cheap that we could reinvest the money and make money on it. So you keep talking about the cost of borrowing, but how much is it going to cost us to borrow?
So we don't have that yet, Mr. Tillman. So we will bring that information to you. It's also, when you look at how large those deferrals can be, and you have to pay it when you have to pay the tran back and all of that. And because our district is highly dependent on state aid, a lot of our money comes from state aid. And so the deferrals impact us more, just as Mr. Gallo was talking about our charter schools. Well, and so we'll be pulling with other districts and we'll be sharing that cost.
But it'd be nice if we knew what a real cost is, because you scare me talking about borrowing. But if it turns out it costs us nothing to borrow, why do we keep talking about it like it's the end of the world? That's the impression I get. Now, maybe it is. Maybe it's going to cost us, $60 million to borrow money. In the past, I don't remember it costing like that. But maybe I'm missing something on it. I don't know.
So we'll have, again, this is hot off the press with the total amount. So we'll get those costs to you.
And when we do the tran, is it as simple as saying we're going to borrow the total amount that we need and put it in our bank account at the county treasurer?
I don't have that with me. I did a BC a couple of weeks ago on that, so I'll bring that back, Mr. Tillman.
And the reason why that's important, because the way we used to do it, we used to borrow the money on the tran and it almost cost us nothing. You could take that money and put it into a 10-year treasury note and you would get a yield that was higher than what you were paying for the money. So you were actually making money on the borrowing the money. So it's important to know if that's still the case, because then there is no cost associated with borrowing the money. And this is a great thing. And perception is everything. I think we make a mistake if we act like there's something bad about this scenario, if it turns out it doesn't cost anything and we're just going to get reimbursed late. But the sooner we know what the actual costs are or what the concerns are about borrowing it, because I don't think that we'll get denied getting the tran, right? We know for sure we'll get a tran, right?
I am assuming we will, and I will bring an update to the board.
Right, and then you'll look at some of the, I'm sure we're going to look at some of the funds that we have for construction, that type of thing.
Interfund borrowing, yes.
And determine whether or not that money is going to be used now. If it's not, you can borrow from that, which would reduce the amount of money you'd have to borrow, right?
Yeah, we'll be using that for sure on this June deferral that's occurring this month, is the interfund. But when you look at the amounts that have to be transferred, we will have to borrow. So we'll be doing both. And
I just want to say, I think because you all have talked about it so much that you have to come back to us and tell us how much it's going to really cost to borrow the money. And you're not going to go through the county treasurer?
We did last time, so I'm thinking we will. So what we'll know, Mr. Tillman, is if we get federal dollars in the fall, and if we do, we don't have to borrow this whole amount because it's a trigger off. It'll be half of the amount. Right. So Mr. Cunningham will be working on those scenarios, and I'll bring it back to the board.
And if you can find out if it's still the same thing, if to borrow the money is so cheap that you'll actually make money on the investment, because I'm sure they still do the interest apportionment on our part of the money. then it'd be good to know that. That way we can come back and tell everybody, even though we had to do the deferment because we didn't have to pay anything, it ended up being benign, because that is a possibility, I think. That's what used to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Dr. Flores?
Yeah, so that I'm going to follow up with a question that Danny was asking. Those are some of the same questions that I was going to ask. Could you go to slide 5, please, Janie? I'll first start with I'll follow up with what Mr. Tillman was saying. It's really important that we as the board know exactly the amount of money that we have to borrow, and also the exact amount that we have in not reserve, but that we can borrow from ourselves, because in our facilities and construction budget, do you know offhand how much we have there?
Dr. Flores, these are the projected amounts we will have to borrow if we don't get federal funding. This is our dollars.
Right here, what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
You requested that it be what it means to us. This is what it means to us.
So my question is, so the first one is 49.7, correct?
For next year, yeah. This year's the first one, 50 million from June of this year to July, on the far left.
On the far left. Oh, over here, okay.
Yeah, so 50 million will be deferred from June, and we'll get it in July, so we can handle that.
Okay, so where are we taking that money from where are we borrowing that from?
We'll borrow it from our own funds.
From our own funds, and
yes.
We need to approve that as a board.
Yeah,
any transfer of money we need to approve.
We do an action item every year, and it already came to the board.
And we approved it?
Yes, and I will update the board correspondence that we did on the deferrals to include this worst case scenario.
I don't recall that we approved borrowing 50 million.
We do it every year. We do every year that we can borrow and do interfund transfers.
Yeah, but you didn't put the amount. You just put interfund.
That's correct, because if we ever need to do it to make payroll, we have the flexibility to get.
No, that's what I was asking, because I don't recall approving 50 million. It was just approval of interfund borrowing. Okay, fine. That was good. Okay, got it. And then as we go along for 2021, then those are the amounts that we have to defer, right? That you have on 21, 22.
That we're not receiving from the state if we don't get federal dollars.
And those are the ones that we have to borrow then?
Correct.
Okay, all right. That was the clarity that I needed.
Okay.
And we should be getting an update. I've been reading the newspaper all day and yesterday, and apparently the Senate is getting ready, I don't know how soon, but to approve another CARES Act. So hopefully we'll get that.
Yeah,
get the money. Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Those were my clarification questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tillman, you had another.
I did. Mr. Kostakis, you mentioned that because of some of the money being one-time money, we were going to look at making cuts.
So the one-time dollars, the slide number 8, I believe. David, if you can move to 8. These are one-time dollars on this chart, Mr. Tillman, that we're getting for 2021. It's the following year when you don't get the one-time dollars where the budget. So we have a year to prepare unless something goes wrong between now and then.
No, but the question I have is, this is one-time money for the CARES and coronavirus relief. What was the gear money?
That's for special ed.
And that was new money, right? But it is new money.
They all are.
Right. But I guess my only concern is, from year to year, we don't know how we're going to receive the money. And from year to year, we get one-time money. so often that I don't know why they keep calling it one-time money.
Well, these are all new, Mr. Tillman, in response to the coronavirus and helping districts, prepare for the distance schooling and helping budget deficits.
I got that. I guess my only concern is, to me, you have to respond to the budget and the money that they're going to propose to give you. That's when we'll decide if we have to make cuts or not. I just get kind of apprehensive when you guys start positioning to make cuts because they may not be realized. You may not need it. I have a real, and I purposely pushed the envelope because it's the situation we're in is 1,000 times better than the one when we thought we were going to cut $97 million.
Yes.
And I said from the beginning, after we heard that the Senate had a different version, it wasn't going to happen. So I think as a board, we'd have to say we didn't get the cuts, because if you don't, the entire district will adopt the philosophy that we have all these cuts we got to make. You already hear the people saying they're worried about layoffs and cutting. The only cuts we made in classified are the routine cuts that we always make in terms of size society. They don't want this position versus that position, and the need for certain positions. That always happens. But in terms of making across the board layoffs to save money, we're not doing that, right? So I think it's important that we say that, because the word should be right now, it's different. It's a difference in day and night from the previous proposal where they were talking about $97 million in cuts to having to do deferrals, and we have the money that we should be able to spend. If we don't, we'll end up with an ending balance of $150 million.
Mr. Tillman, thank you. I thought I said that at the beginning, so I apologize if I didn't come across as being very thankful for our the hand we're being dealt right now. Thank you.
I'll sound happier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we're gonna let her go ahead and finish through towards the end. We appreciate your comments, and then we'll pick it back up. So Janie, will you finish through what?
Yes.
Thank
you. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Next slide, David. Okay, so here is our preliminary multi-year projection. Let's look at, so the question always comes up, what will our ending balance be? So you can look at line 9, our reserve for, on the first column, reserve for restricted fund balance is about 14 million, reserve for economic uncertainties 14.9, and reserve for deficit spending is that 15 million that you saw earlier in the public hearing. So if you, Daniel, could you click once? So if you look at next year, you see the revenues go up because we're getting 54 million in one-time dollars. And then expenditures increase because we're going to be doing physically distant schooling. We're going to replenish some of the devices. And then we have a projected deficit spending. We think our beginning balance will be 44.3 million, and we'll end next year with 33.8. 14 million reserved for restricted, 15 for economic uncertainties, and then we think we'll have 4.1 million beyond that. That will get spent the following year. So if you can click one more time. On line number 3, as we know today, based on zero COLA and not getting additional CARES or gear or anything like that, we would have to make 37 million in reductions in 21-22 and 64.5 the following year. So in order to have a balanced budget. So we have to be prepared because COVID has been very devastating to the economy. And that's what the budget committees are doing, is looking at how can we streamline, what can we do through attrition, all the things that we can do so that we're prepared should the economy continue to be impacted, and depending on how long it is before we recover. And that's it for this slide. We know that a lot's going to happen between now and 21-22, but as required by the County Office of Education, by first and second interim, if the budget remains as we know it today, we will have to identify what those reductions will be. And that's just part of what we're required to do. Next slide. And then again, just being prepared for what's ahead. There's a lot of things that occur year to year. Our costs go up each year, and with a 0% COLA, you can't keep up with the increased costs. So it's good to have higher reserves than the minimum. Next slide. And then here's our calendar. Next week, we'll present the same budget to you as an approval for the year. If anything major changes, we will do our 45-day budget revision, which will come to the board. Again, the governor and the legislature will have further deliberations in August. And then September, we'll have our unaudited actuals. And so that's probably really all I need to point out at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Christakos, for your presentation. And again, just for the board, we know this has been a long journey. And I think in the leadership, we decided that we would meet and meet and meet as we look forward to what we thought could have happened. You know, from the temperature check that I'm getting from individuals, this is good news. And this is the reason why we're live. We're going live to let everyone see, you know, where we are, where we could have been. We're grateful that we're not there. But here we are. No one's talking about cuts. No one's wanted to do cuts. No one wanted to see the ultimate happen. And we're grateful for this. And as we carve through it, that's why we're meeting every week, so that we can get on track and ensure that our students can start school. We can go back to doing what we do. We're in the business of educating students, and we need the money to do it. And so we're happy to see that things are taking a little turn. But as we know, things will change a little bit here and there. And that's why we're listening and we're making sure we know where we are. And every day something could change, but we are receiving some good news. And we do want to celebrate that and let our community know that that's why we're sitting here in this meeting, so you can see it as we see it in real time. I believe there's a couple of comments. Again, we have Mr. Tillman, followed by Dr. Flores, followed by Dr. Hill.
And Ms. Christakis, how much did we actually deficit spend in last year's budget?
It was over 15 million. The reason that we project it higher this year, Mr. Tillman, is we had a very large textbook adoption. I think it was close to 20 million, 18 or 19 million. And we also had expenditures from the Board of Ed, the construction that was from previous carryovers. And so those were some of the reasons we project a higher deficit spending this year.
And are you looking at the numbers right now? They're still telling you we're close to having a $46 million?
That's where, so we'll be paying bills and doing things, you know, we still have payroll through August. And so that's how it looks at this point. And we'll continue to keep you updated on that.
And I'll tell you what my concern is, you know, and in the end, it works out because we'll have a whole bunch of extra money left over. Because I just can't imagine our district deficit spending by $46 million. But you're gonna, and we won't know until September when we do all the actuals. But when you look at the beginning fund balance for 2019, 2020, I guarantee if you go back and look at the same budget page 4 years ago, when 2019, 2020 was the out year, it probably would have said a projected ending balance was $15 million. Because that's how conservative we are. And that's okay, but I think when when you tell the folks the money they can spend is there, and this is the message to the employees, you should spend the money. I just hope they don't get the impression that, because they should. If I thought this paper was going to end up being this way, where we're going to have $25 million in ending balance in 22, 23, then I will be talking about making cuts right now. But historically, that doesn't happen. So I have to just believe that it won't go in that direction. But I hope that other employees spend the money that they're allocated. And I don't know what their ending fund balances look like, but I hope as a district, we make sure we spend the money on this year's kids. Thank you.
Dr. Flores?
Ms. Christakos, thank you for preparing all of this and your team. I just want to ask, what is the COLA costs for all of our employees?
So the COLA it's not for the employees, it's on the revenue that.
I mean, yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, okay, I want to make sure I understood that right.
Okay.
So what we were projecting was almost 10 million, about 9.6 million that we're not getting for
That
next
we're
year.
not getting.
Yeah.
But it's still on the table, right? It's not yet. I mean, right now we don't have it, but aren't they negotiating for
I
the,
saw that there's no COLA. Section 4223.8.021 specifies that the COLA shall be 0 for 2021.
Mhm.
So that's our
That's a
understanding.
final? That's a final?
Yeah, that's part of the K-12 Budget Act, Senate, let's see, it's AB 77. And
Okay.
so, but I think because they were proposing a COLA, Dr. Flores, it's been quite, an up and down ride over the last several weeks. So the Senate was proposing a COLA, but the agreement between the legislature and the governor came out with no COLA,
With
but
COLA.
no deficit either. So that was good.
Okay. So we lost about 10 million
Yeah. Mhm.
with that. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. I just needed a clarification. And I agree with Danny. We always come up with more in our ending balance that people haven't spent. So I'm hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flores.
Dr. Hill?
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Christakis, thank you so much. And certainly let your team know they did a great job with this presentation. It has been wonderful. I've enjoyed following, and I think I pretty much understood everything. So again, I want to say thank you. But I just have a couple of questions. First, I want to make a comment. I was just so glad to hear that we aren't going to have the cuts, because that's always difficult. We already have a city with a number of economic problems. And so, and I know many of our classified and hopefully more of our certificated would find San Bernardino be a place that they would want to live, so that we can continue to build our database and do what we need to do for this city. Lots of potential, but we have to be here to do that. So I'm just glad to hear that there aren't going to be any cuts. One of the questions I have, will we continue with the city having its financial goals? We'll continue getting the redevelopment monies that we get yearly or annually?
Yes, we will. Most of those dollars go to pay our COP payments, but we actually referred to our RDA specialist, and he studied at the state level, and those dollars are still coming to us and will.
Great. And the other one, I know there was a delay with the deadline for state taxes, as well as, of course, federal taxes. So does this mean there's a possibility that what the amount we get will either go up or down? Hopefully it will increase and not decrease.
Yeah, hopefully it will increase, but yes, you're correct. That's why the governor and the legislature has said, be prepared for further, changes in August because of that big shift of when our taxes are due.
Okay, and my final question is, and I didn't think of this until I heard Mr. Gallo mention charter schools, but I know we have a few charter schools that's not under our jurisdiction, but under the county. Do we have a partnership or relationship with those schools that their SELPA either comes through us, or are there any financial concerns that we are either giving them money or they're giving us funds?
So for the SELPA, is that what I'm sorry?
Not just the SELPA, but I know there are 2 or 3 charter schools in San Bernardino City, and they have not been, they are good charter schools and they approved charter schools, but they're not schools that came before us.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, are they contributing to the special ed, or?
Well, maybe I should reword my question. Are there any financial considerations with those charter schools? Because I know with our charter schools, I believe they pay for certain services to us.
Yes.
Do the charter schools from that's not under our jurisdiction, are there any financial payments that we get, or does it all go to the county?
So I will have to check. It's a great question. So if they receive special education services from us, then they pay for them. If they pay for police services, then they pay us for that. Those are the two. And if there are facilities that they use, then there's a cost to that as well. So let me find out for you. I'll do a BC, Dr. Hill, and get that back to you.
Great. And if you could include food services with that as well.
Yeah, and food service as well. They do provide for some of our charter schools.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thanks for doing a great job. And I have all the confidence in the world that we are going to do wonderful. The thing we just have to remember is if we just spend what we need to spend, I think we would be okay. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Ms. Rosales Medina.
Likewise, thank you for the presentation. I was going to ask, when you're looking at funding, and this may be with another budget conversation we're going to have with programs and so forth. One of the complaints I was getting is that the current programs that we're using, I believe, hold on, let me get my glasses, that they were like Wonders, which is for language arts, and Vision. I didn't hear any complaints when it came to the middle and high school, but for elementary, those two were complicated. Is there any model or looking at what homeschooling programs are using, other distance learning programs that are using before, of course, we entered to the COVID, so many of them have programs that are very effective. Have we looked into other programs? Or maybe a good question would ask, how are the staff and families and students feeling about the current programs that we have right now?
So I will have to defer that, Dr. Volkemer.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. Ms. Rosales Medina, if you're talking about their experiences with distance, I think I heard you say distance learning.
Yes, with the programs Wonders and Envision. So I know we're using that, and so the questions was asked was when it comes to budget, has our district looked at using maybe other platforms, the programs pertaining to better ways to teach online?
We'll bring you back specific information about those programs, but I do know that we're in the middle of a survey with all of our teachers right now, asking them about their experiences in distance learning. I believe that comes to a conclusion July 6th, and so we'll have that data available just in terms of how did it work, how can we get better, et cetera, but we'll look into both of those programs for you.
Okay, yeah, just to make sure, and then even asking students, how effective was it? Are there other alternatives? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was it.
All right, Mr. Gallo.
Yes, I had a kind of a follow-up to Margaret's question. Margaret, you were talking about charters that were not chartered by us, but are existing in San Bernardino City Unified School District boundaries.
That's correct.
So I just, I heard, Janie, you characterized what you would get, Margaret, is like looking at all charter schools and the financial, whether we're providing any financial assistance or getting paid from these things. So I think she was specifically requesting those charter schools that we did not approve per se, or that aren't chartered through us, yet are resident in our district boundaries. Is that what you understood?
Yes, I was just going to give an update on everything, Mr. Gallo.
Okay, but the segregation of those, I think that's an important segregation.
I will. Yeah, I will make sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think we covered all the questions. So I am going to 4.3. Again, I'm closing this one because I don't show this one on here that we're voting. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I'm closing this public hearing on 4.3, and I will open the public hearing on 4.4, Memorandum of Understanding 410 Summer Compressed Work Schedule between the San Bernardino City Unified School District and the Classified School Employees Association and its Charter 183. Are there comments?
No public comments.
Okay. And board, is there any comments?
I have a comment. You know, the 410s, I mean, is,
You're supposed to put the
Oh, wait, hold on, Mr. Gallo. I look back. Mr. Tillman is in the box.
oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, Danny.
You're supposed to go to your chat and put your name in there, Mike. You're supposed to write, I have a question. Just for clarification.
Thank you for
That's
Thank you.
funny coming from Danny.
Thank you for that instruction, Danny. I really appreciate it.
It's disrespectful. Jump in. Tell me that.
Okay. Tillman, you're up.
I didn't think there were any other questions. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody else used that excuse.
But this is just for a formality of allowing some classified employees to do 410s. Dr.
Is that
Volker,
correct, Mr. Tillman?
Yes.
and it lasts between what and what?
It has a sunset date in
I
there.
got it, June 8th through July 24th.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Mr. Oh, Mr. Gallo, do you have a question? I didn't see anything in
Well,
there.
yeah, I was gonna type, but Danny kind of asked the same thing as to what it was. I mean, I know we've had some things where we've kind of closed down offices on Fridays, every other Fridays, on things like this, and I know it's been a problem for people, especially during the school year, and even as we're approaching, beginning of a school year, just when parents have so many questions, and it's really hard to get a hold of anybody to do this. So I think we ought to maintain at least some skeleton staff for that kind of, to make sure that we're actually being available. I don't know if that's been thought of to have some staff available really throughout the year. So just my comment.
Mr. Gallo, this only occurs in the summer. The only time we're closed during the year would be for a recognized holiday. This is this short amount of time is only during the summer.
Okay, but I know some school sites and everything. I mean, if I hear it, I guarantee the rest of you are hearing it. That it's just impossible to get any feedback. I never get phone calls back and stuff. So I don't know if we've got a Tiger team that actually is responsible for those kinds of calls. I still don't think we actually have a way to leave messages at school sites and stuff. I mean, I don't know if we got voicemail. Have we ever done that? Yeah, I'm just. I mean, the schools I've called and stuff, it just rings and rings and nobody answers, and it's and I know it's frustrating for some parents. So
There should be a voicemail option at all schools that is monitored by school personnel. Obviously, we have limited personnel at the schools because of physical distancing and stay-at-home orders. We're again starting to repopulate district offices, working toward repopulating district offices. That should solve itself, but the voicemail system has been in place.
okay.
And I've called the voicemail system and I haven't received a call back. So I mean, we want to relook at that. I was just testing it out. So
Me too. I mean, so.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask for Mr. Tillman's comment, and then I see you, Dr. Flores. Thank you for that, and I'm gonna be it resolved, and then we'll need a second. Mr. Tillman?
Yeah, Miss Medina, you got to put your thing in the chat.
Danny.
okay.
But to Mike's point, the issue is this. I think when we did 410, we did it with also the thought of saving money on closing buildings, right, Dr. Volkemer?
Yes.
And I think that's the part that needs to change. I think because you could do 410 and have coverage, because you could have some staff off on a Monday and other half off on a Friday, so people would be at the site. So, and I agree with Mr. Gallo, because I've heard the same complaint. I really think it's better to have the offices open, and you can still allow the staff to do 410s, just have the staggered coverage. But I think it'll be a huge benefit, especially now because we've been off for so long. There's so many questions out there from parents in the community about where we're going to proceed. So I think you're better off having that extra day open every week. I don't think it's a good idea to be closed every Friday. They can still do 410s, just do 410s with coverage. I think it makes a big difference. And we just eat the cost for keeping the buildings open, because we're not going to deficit spend by $46 million. So I'll give you $1 million to keep the buildings open.
All right, I don't see any other comments. Okay, I don't see any more comments, so we're going to go ahead and call for the vote. Be it resolved that the Board of Education adopts the Memorandum of Understanding MOU 410 Summer Compressed Work Schedule between the San Bernardino City Unified School District and the California School Employees Association and its charter and its chapter number 123C SCA. And I see Dr. Flores has made a motion.
Yes, I move to adopt CSEA MOU of 410.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, and I am going to call for the vote. There's no further discussion. All right, Dr. Hill?
Aye.
Mr. Tillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gallo?
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt?
Aye.
Dr. Flores?
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina?
Aye.
And Glenn Rogers, aye. Motion carried. Thank you. All right. I am now closing. I'm now going to open the next 4.5 is, and I'm actually hitting something, Mike. 4.5 District and Contract Proposal, Reopener to California School Employees Association, Chapter 183. Are there any comments on that one?
There were no public comments.
All right, no public comments. Board? Any discussion, any information needed? I don't see anything. Okay, well, we're voting on this one.
We're going to close the meeting first, right? The hearing.
Let me close the, there's no discussion. I'm closing the hearing, and now we will call.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, it's been a motion and a second, and I'm going to call for the vote if there's no further discussion. All right, Mr. Tillman.
Aye.
Mr. Gallo.
Aye.
Dr. Flores.
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina.
Aye. Aye.
Dr. Wyatt. Dr. Wyatt, you're on mute. Okay, he gets.
Aye. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I try to keep it off so I don't make any comments.
Absolutely, thank you. Dr. Hill.
Aye.
All right, and Ms. Rogers, aye. Motion carried. Thank you. We are now moving forward to public comments. 5.1, I believe we do have public comments. Okay. Karen, you are up.
Okay. We have like 12 comments. They're all basically related to item 6.2 with the school calendar on reopening of sites.
Okay, and before you do that, Karen, let me say this. This is the time that members of the public are provided an opportunity to directly address items placed on the school board meeting Comments are limited to 5 minutes or less and will be read by a facilitator. Individuals with comments on any other subject matter within the board's jurisdiction may address those during the regular meeting of the Board of Education on July 14th, 2020. Any comments that are received through the public comment forum not related to items on the special meeting agenda will be read at the next regular meeting of the Board of Education.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The first one is from Ashley Bita Sakala, the president of the San Bernardino Teachers Association. She says, SBTA has participated in the district's calendar advisory committee, as well as surveying our members regarding the start of the 2020-2021 school year. Based on our survey results and the recommendation of the district to begin the year in virtual setting with students due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our members overwhelmingly support starting on August 3rd as previously approved by you. At this time, we urge the board to follow the recommendation of the District Calendar Advisory Committee and our members and reaffirm our start date as August 3rd, 2020. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next one is from Brianna G. Regarding the school hours, once open for the 2020-21 school year, I think our children should be allowed a Monday, Wednesday, Friday school week with at least 5 hours, such as 7:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. with a Tuesday, Thursday distance learning schedule to allow the school to have a full 24 hours without student body for proper sanitation and cleaning. 2 days a week at 4 hours a day does not seem plausible for working families. And if after school programs will still be in place, then the hours they're allowed on school grounds to actually learn seem irrelevant. I understand the severity of what is happening in the world now and want the best for all students, but they need to learn in an actual school environment, not just with packets that are sent home weekly. Next one is from Sadie Espinoza. And she simply says full distance learning or all in school. Next one's from Anonymous. On June 18th, certificated staff were sent out a survey on distance learning feedback. As of now, classified staff hasn't seen any type of survey, and yet time is ticking and our return to work date approaches. Decisions have to be made on whether we are returning to site or working from home. It would be nice to be included to know what is going on. Right now, it doesn't seem like you guys meeting only once a week is working. Yes, as of now, school starts August 3rd, but 10 and 11-month employees return sooner to get things in order, ready, and prepared. We need to know how we are starting, where we are starting, and what do we need to prepare. The school year doesn't just start. Your classified employees are there getting ready to make sure it starts smooth. We need answers now. Next one is from Martine McJimson. The reopening of the SBCUSD should be delayed due to the observed increase in cases of COVID-19, with the known cause of the spread being gatherings with those who are of different households being a cause, along with those who are asymptomatic. To protect the youth and educators, please revisit the plan on continuing education from a distance with its daily virtual teachings in a Black forum. Although you are providing options, it still places a risk to the community with those seeking the face-to-face option because of the possibility of spread from being out in other social events. Next one is from Anonymous. Oh. I would like to say that I know for myself, safety is the #1 concern. I have underlying health issues, but I also feel like we must continue to move forward in educating our students. We have board members to hear our concerns, give their input, and guide us in the direction moving forward. With that being said, I agree with Dr. Flores' insecurities, but I also feel that she is on one side of the spectrum and not taking into account everyone. It felt as if she rejected any chance of hearing a vote before the meeting began. Just my opinion, the district should start school on the scheduled date already agreed upon and give parents two options. One, virtual learning until the student and parent feel ready to return. Two, physical full day in-school learning and getting the support they need Tuesday through Friday, with Monday virtual learning for all with no staff on campus. If students go with the half-day schedule and or 2 out of 4 days, it is not consistent enough to support meaningful learning. It's like college. You go to school 2 days a week for certain classes and pull an all-nighter the day before you return to school. You complete work to get by, not to retain or understand. If you do end up doing that, it would be best to have students go 2 days in a row instead of breaking it up. Plus, with half days, if parents need help watching their kids because of work or transportation, then they can choose to attend CAPS, which means they are still physically on campus and not learning in a classroom environment, because CAPS is more a social setting versus an academic one, which is why it is best offered after school hours. So this means the kids who are in CAPS are not virtually engaged with their teacher like the other half that is at home. This doesn't make sense. The biggest reason I am offering my comment is so that parents, staff, and students can create a plan for their life that fits into the school plan. So a parent who is unemployed can look for a job that allows for certain days or times off, so that a parent who pays for daycare can consult and see what the difference is and if transportation is included with half days or split days. So students can now have a set schedule and not have the anxiety of not knowing what their year is going to look like because a decision still hasn't been made. So that staff can arrange for their own children in home life to work with or around a school schedule, and what that looks like for parents who have to physically work while their child is learning online and may or may not need their support. Thank you for your time. Next one is from Debbie Venditti. My concern with going back is the fact that there is no feasible way to keep us safe. When we shut down in March, there had only been 100 deaths. Now we have over 120,000, and the numbers continue to rise daily. Today, California hit a record high of 6,000 new cases, almost doubled from yesterday. I read in the news yesterday that one school in South Africa, 8 teachers tested positive and got sick. They closed the school last Thursday and reopened it Monday. I know this is not near us, but there can be a lesson learned from it. It's the teachers, parents, and grandparents of the kids who are at most risk of getting sick and possibly dying. I just can't even wrap my head around the fact that you would even consider reopening in a matter of weeks with the numbers skyrocketing again, knowing full well you can't guarantee our safety even a little bit. I want to know how many teachers and staff you are willing to lose to this virus to make opening up again worth it. To me, one is too many. One last point that I would like to make is this: starting with our special education population, who are some of the most fragile kids we have, is just absurd to me. My school has 4 classes of moderate severe students, some of whom are already on ventilators. We even have a general ed student on a ventilator. Many of the students in this population are constantly sick. They come to school with oral secretions running down their faces constantly, with teachers and aides responsible for caring for that. Bathroom issues and accidents daily, including diarrhea, which they're supposed to go home for, but getting them picked up is an issue, and the office isn't equipped to handle them while we wait, so they remain in the classrooms. Keeping this population away from each other is an impossibility, as many are not mentally aware enough to help us help them. There can be no distance between the teachers and students in this population, as they have too many hands-on needs. They will be at constant risk. How many of those students are you willing to put at risk of possibly getting, and at worst, dying from this disease? To risk their lives at all is unconscionable, but to put them at risk first is criminal, in my opinion. Thank you for your time. Next one is from Kimberly Laurie. Excuse me. Good evening, board members, Dr. Volkmar, and SBCUSD district staff. First, allow me to say thank you for all of the hard work that you have been digging into as we prepare to return to our sites and our students to classes. I have a lot of questions and concerns in regards to our return to school, but the largest and most looming one on my mind deals with the initial virtual distance learning accessibility for our students. Like many of our students, I have a Khajiit that has the 1 gig of daily internet Wi-Fi access, and have come to find out that when holding my office hours, that 1 gig of Wi-Fi will only allow me about 45 minutes of a Google Meets, and then it stops and I am literally done for the day. Can the IRT team or Dr. Volkmer please address how we as a district will address this issue for our students and staff members if we are going to initially return in a distance learning format with the expectations that students at the secondary level virtually attend 2 to 3 and possibly 4 classes daily? How will this be possible if they only have enough data to access 45 minutes of a Google Meets class before they run out of daily accessible data? Also, can Dr. Volkmer or one of the staff please explain why the $50 that was allocated to all teachers to help offset our home internet was taxed as income? I believe that our understanding, I have conferred with several of my staff members as well, was that would be a separate amount sent like a reimbursement when we attended conferences. I understand that our budget is very tight with everything going on, but as a teacher, I struggle with how to appropriately hold my students accountable for their assignments and attending virtual classes, knowing that a great many of them only have the 1 gig of data accessibility and have to.
Karen? Karen?
Yes, did you lose me?
Yes, we did.
Oh my, where?
Just right.
About
back.
2 sentences back.
Correct.
Two
I'm sorry?
sentences back.
Go back a couple of sentences.
I understand that our budget is very tight.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. I understand that our budget is very tight with everything going on, but as a teacher, I struggle with how to appropriately hold my students accountable for their assignments and attending virtual classes, knowing that a great many of them only have the 1 gig of data accessibility and have to make the difficult choices of which class or classes are the most important to show up to. I would really appreciate the board looking deeper into a more extensive data plan for students as part of the initial recommendations stated that we as a district also would like to offer a 100% distance learning option as well. The current data accessibility, in my experience, will not support either students or staff in a distance learning environment to the levels that we are expected to be held accountable for. Thank you for your time. Okay, this one is from Dr. Anthony Leonardi. My name is Anthony Leonardi, and I am a California resident currently in medical school, educated at Johns Hopkins, and did my PhD work at the National Cancer Institute on T-cell function, dysfunction, and immunity. These degrees were enabled by a San Bernardino School District Employee Scholarship and a Governor's Scholarship for SAT 9 performance that paid my deposit and my moving fees. I am indebted and proud to be a Californian, and I plan on returning to California. The reason I believe that schools should not open or have indoor classes is that the novel coronavirus is too easily spread by air, and it is too easily spread during asymptomatic periods. To put it simply, the virus is cunning and evil. It infects cells responsible for repairing the lungs, and it infects T cells that come to respond to the virus. While for children, the risk of death is very low, kids are still churning out new highly functional immune cells that resist the effects of the virus and are able to control it. Their families and the adults that work at the school are not so impervious. We see that adults are affected for a significant time with blood clots in veins and arteries, brain damage, nerve damage, heart damage, and of course, lung damage, even if they were asymptomatic. Also, children are susceptible to a new form of vasculitis that causes their skin to shed, bleed, and their hearts to leak, although this is not common. It would be a tragedy of public health to attempt to open now. It would increase the number of cases in the state, give workers risk of permanent disability, and endanger families. It would be a tragedy of the public school system to overlook the inevitable, and I can guarantee it would be an inevitable resurgence and catastrophe and endanger the people it serves. Unfortunately, we cannot rid the virus with any sort of stubborn resolution to return to normal. To open in haste and risk so many lives when we have several vaccine candidates in the pipeline, with some optimistically projected to be available late fall, would be tragic. Furthermore, if the vaccines are unable to confer immunity and rather simply make the disease course lighter, it would make sense to transition to a more virtually delivered curriculum and a virtual work environment, which would have been an extremely absurd idea in December and only a half absurd idea now. Sincerely, Anthony Leonardi. Next one is from a concerned secondary teacher. As a secondary teacher, I am very concerned with the plans we have heard for reopening schools. We all want to be back in school with our kids, but only if it is done safely and realistically. As far as time in the classroom for teaching, we are already limited as it is having to deal with everyday behavioral issues and go over PBIS skills. Even with smaller classes, we will undoubtedly have to now deal with students who do not follow procedures for helping everyone stay healthy and safe. With our students, especially secondary students who understand the importance and still refuse to do so, will there be repercussions for them? Will there be somewhere else other than the classroom if they can't cooperate, or will we be forced to endure a daily battle with repeating safety rules as we have been doing for years with PBIS, especially since this can be a life-threatening situation? Why should I, my coworkers, and other students be expected to put up with this type of behavior if it runs the risk of us or our loved ones becoming sick if they refuse to listen to us? Also, regarding secondary science, STEM, hands-on elective classes, what are the expectations for students regarding standards requiring them to do hands-on manipulations, labs, projects, performances? The suggested secondary schedule where teachers rotate and students stay does not work, as equipment must be hauled around and sanitized after every usage. Also, students cannot be within a certain distance of each other, and in no way do any of our classes have enough materials for individual labs or projects. There is not enough time for us, and I'm sorry she didn't finish that sentence. There is not enough time for us to, and that ends. What are your expectations for us as teachers to do our jobs accordingly to state standards? Now that it is becoming a reality that children are also affected by this virus, not just teachers, we have to consider all actions we take from here on out very carefully. We have a very high percentage of students in our district with diabetes, which is a population that can be severely affected by contracting this virus. I am anxious to get back. I miss my kids. There are schools in England who opened up with reduced classrooms and had to close indefinitely because students contracted the virus. It is very worrisome if we move too fast on making any rash decisions, trying to get back to campuses too quickly. Thank you for your time. I have one from Anonymous, and it just asks, what does option 1 mean by virtual learning with soft opening? That's that. And my last one is from Zachary. And it just says, instead of doing hybrid, can schools go back to year round? And that is all, Madam President.
Thank you, Karen. We appreciate that. And again, Dr. Volkemer, I know you take copious notes on, there is many things in there that need to get back and make sure that our parents are clear on. So we appreciate you capturing those things. And again, thank you for your comments to our community. Moving on to action item 6.0, 6.1, resolution ordering school district election for governing board members whose terms expire December 11, 2020. And I will read: the district has been notified of the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools that the election of School Trustees is required to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. It is required at this time that the resolution ordering school district election for governing board members whose terms expire December 11, 2020 be adopted by the governing board and filed with the registrar of voters office. Be it resolved that pursuant to Education Code 5302, the county superintendent of schools of this county is hereby ordered to call an election for the purpose and in accordance with the designations contained in the following specifications of the election order made under the authority of Education Code Section 5304, 5320, and 532020. Specifications of the election order, date of election, Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Purpose, election of governing board members. Polls will open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Be it also resolved that the following governing board members are those whose terms will expire December 11, 2020, Michael J. Gallo, Margaret Hill, Gwendolyn Dowdy Rogers, Scott Wyatt. Be it further resolved that the order of election and specification of the election order setting Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 as the date for election of governing board members in the San Bernardino City Unified School District Board of Education be approved.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. If there's no discussion, we will take the vote.
Madam President, I thought we already made this motion a long time ago. Like when Danny, when we were elected, you and Abigail and I, we moved from a odd number to a even number. Remember that?
Yes.
This is something I have.
This is the annual. Don't they do this annually when the
Yes.
election comes
Oh,
up?
we have to do it annually. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. Okay.
Okay. No other discussion? Then I will call for the vote. Dr. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Tillman,
Aye.
Dr. Hill,
Aye.
Mr. Gallo,
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina,
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt,
Aye.
Gwen Rogers, aye. Thank you. Motion carried. We are now at item 6.2, 2020-2021 school calendar.
Thank you, President Rogers. Board, just a couple comments before we get into a very brief presentation, actually. Last week, we shared a very comprehensive plan about the research that our broad-based work group has been doing about reopening schools. And as you heard from public comment this evening, opinions are varied across the spectrum. There are people that say bring all the kids back tomorrow. There are people that say do not bring anybody back until such time as we have a vaccine or whatever the trigger would be. So we recognize that there's a great degree of uncertainty out there, and we want to try to bring at least one piece of the puzzle to some degree of finality this evening. So we're just asking the board to basically to confirm a decision you've already made. We talked about the possibilities around start date, getting back to school 2021. And we're just going to bring some information to you. And our recommendation is that you confirm that date of August 3rd. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Welcomer. I just have 2 slides, Daniel. If you can bring those up. Yes, I will be brief, like Dr. Welcomer earlier said. So number one is also what we brought to you last board meeting, that our recommendation is to stay with the calendar you've already adopted for the 2021 school year. And that starts August 3rd, which would be distance learning, starting on August 3rd. And then the calendar would end on June the 3rd. We have broad representation on that committee. Yesterday, I double checked with each association presidents, and they are all in agreement to stay with this adopted calendar. There is another option, and that's number 2, where you would start 2 weeks later and end on the same date in June, the difference there would be you lose a week in a winter break and at spring break. Number 3 and 4, after a lot of discussions with our business department and attendance accounting, those we have crossed out because the fiscal impact due to P2 and the required amount of days makes this really unacceptable. It would be millions of dollars that we would lose. Attendance accounting, we need to have is saying that we need 137 days of instruction by the end of March to make sure we get the proper funding from the state. So Daniel, if you could go to slide 2, and some of this is a repeat, but I just wanted to make sure that you do know that all 4 associations are in favor of your already board adopted calendar. And that committee is broad. It not only has the associations, it has district administrator, it has office staff. So, and that committee's been in place for as long as I can remember. The other reason we really like the original calendar, the one you've adopted, is the first semester ends before winter break and the finals are done. In the past, I know students had to, when they came back in January, they did finals. So I know the teachers feel like that is the best thing to get those finals done before the students go on winter break. Another reason we like the calendar that is currently adopted is that it maximizes the days of instruction before the state test occurs. So that's an important item, and that's one reason we went to an early start years ago, so we would maximize. Just to reiterate, August 3rd is not a date that employees will come back to work. They'll come back to work virtually, but they won't come back to work physically. So I just wanted the community to know that, that if this calendar is adopted or readopted maybe, that August 3rd date, students would be on a distance learning mode. And I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Okay, and thank you again for that, Tom. And so board, this information came back in a short presentation because I do think we needed to be a little bit clear. There was comments and questions that were coming from the community, as well as what decision was made. So we'll be taking action on this. And I am going to begin the comments with Dr. Flores, followed by Mr. Tillman.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your clarity on this. And I also appreciate that all the unions are on board, as well as our administrators are on board. And I've been contacted by many teachers and regarding, their health and safety, and also parents regarding their children. And as we heard Dr. Leonardi's letter of caution to us, I think that the fact that we're going to go back to distance learning echoes many of their concerns. I want to read something by Eric Steffens. He's one of our teachers. He says, "We must learn from the wrong decisions that we've made and instead be resolute and patient in the coming months. A vaccine will be developed. Treatments will become available, and the virus will be eradicated, hopefully. I urge our leaders in our district to prioritize human life above all other factors and understand that this virus will transmit based on our decisions, your decisions. If we choose to continue distance learning, lives will be saved. I repeat, if we choose to continue distance learning, lives will be saved. If we choose to return to school as normal, and meet as normal, meaning physically, a lot of lives will inevitably be lost. So it's really heartening to me that we are going to open up like a soft opening with distance learning. And, you know, as Dr. Leonardi said, there probably will be a vaccine available in the fall, the late fall. And to me, I will reiterate again that it's lives that are more important. Our families, you know, our children may be asymptomatic, and it doesn't matter if we, you know, if we take our temperatures and so forth, but we could be spreading, you know, the disease without even knowing. And to me, you know, our health and our safety and our children's and families' lives matter. So I'm really supportive of what the unions and the administrators and also parents. I've gotten tons of emails and texts and calls from parents. So, of course, there's another side. Some parents want them to come forth, but I don't think people know how dangerous this disease is. It's very dangerous. So thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Tillman.
Did we have parents on the committee?
Mr. Tillman, my understanding is that there were not any parents on that committee.
Well, can I ask a question, Mr. Tillman? Which committee are you referring? The calendar?
Has there been a meeting of parents about this calendar?
Dr. Menares, did you cover calendar specific issues in your live stream meetings with the parents?
No, Dr. Volkamer, we were focused on the how of returning to school, not the actual start date.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important that we have a meeting and involve parents and hear what they say and allow them to be part of the process. And let me back up by saying no one listening in this meeting or listening to this meeting caused the coronavirus. And it's a bad situation that we all have to deal with. And so we're just trying to approach the situation and make the best of it. And I say that so that we don't get really angry at each other, because we realize there's not going to be the perfect way of educating kids that's going to come out of this. It's going to be a bad situation no matter how you look at it. So I think we should start from there. And I agree that safety should be first and foremost. But I also know that you even have husbands and wives in the same house that don't agree whether the kids should go to school or not go to school, right? So that is an issue. But there's a good point that came up tonight, because it makes sense to me. If we're really having a problem with the 1 gig of data, have we addressed that? If in practical terms, 1 gig of data only gives you 45 minutes a day for a meeting, then that is an issue. Is that the case?
Mr. Tillman, we'll have to bring some information back to you. That's not what I've heard, but I don't want to go by what I've heard. We haven't done any formal study in terms of does the Khajiit give enough power to extend through a day. We can certainly have our IT people look at that.
Yeah, it's not the power, but it's the amount of data they're going to allow you to use before they cut you off. And in terms of, it's a big difference between using the internet and doing a meeting, because it will use a lot more of your bandwidth.
But Mr. Tillman, on this, let me just ask a quick question, because I know this is real important to the community, and you know, we attempted to do a good job at the last time we heard the presentation regarding the calendar date. And so the board did ask for some additional information about the calendar. And so I agree with you that that's an important thing. And we did tell Dr. Volkamer, ensure that they need to go back and look at that, just as the other requests that we made. But on this calendar, we have to be very clear tonight on the decision we're making. We wanted to hear from the unions at the last meeting, and we did gather that information. And here we are needing to decide when school starts. And I
Well,
said school again because
no,
not the brick and mortar.
But my point is this, and we can meet on the 30th. I'm fine. Somebody got hacked and they set on a meeting anyway for the 30th. But but my point is this: I don't know how you could say we're going to have virtual school starting on the 3rd if you really, I mean, if you don't address if it's a real issue that 1 gig of data gives you 45 minutes worth of time on the computer, then kids can't have school. So you're going to start school on the 3rd, and a large percentage of your school population doesn't have access to school? No,
but the safety issue
my
is.
My point is this. So if you come back to us and we can't resolve that, or it's going to take time to do it, that's when you could have another option of, hey, let's go to the other date. If we talk to the providers and they tell us it's going to take you X amount of time to do the contract and to increase your bandwidth. But to just vote on a start date without knowing that we're prepared to start on that date and provide learning to all our students, I don't understand what that gets me. Other than you pick the day to start school and you're going to go live no matter what. And if kids really, from a practical perspective, can't participate, then you're not really having school. And
so we certainly want them to participate. We definitely want them to participate.
So my point is, and I've said this in the past, the logistics should drive what the date is. The fact that you don't know whether the Khajiits work or not, and we haven't talked to the parents at all, is a concern of mine. So I think those are big things enough. And I'm not saying you won't have it on the 3rd, but I say we ought to get together and meet again next Tuesday, have another meeting, and let's get the additional information. You guys can schedule a meeting with parents now and then, at least offer it up to them and say, hey, we want to hear what your input is and how do you feel about starting on the 3rd in just a virtual way, and get a feel for some input at least where they're at. Because if I ask the question, did you meet with the parents, then my next question would have been, what did the parents say? And do the parents want to go just virtual, or do the parents want to have some physical education? Because it's simple for me. If I have teachers that want to come back to a site, and I have parents that want their kids to come back to a site, of course, you'll have all the distance learning, you'll have all your PPEs in place, then that's a win-win for those groups. But if we don't know that information, then we can't make that decision. But and one other thing, because it's not on the agenda, I heard from some teachers that said they'd rather use Zoom versus the Google class, because Zoom allows them to do breakout sessions and a host of other things that the tool that we've given them cannot. Have we had a discussion yet with the teachers to determine whether or not they want to use Zoom, and can we allow them to use Zoom?
Okay, and is anyone prepared to answer that second portion of Mr. Tillman's question?
Mr. Tillman, I alluded to the fact that we're surveying the teachers right now on their distance learning experiences. I'll double check for you to see if that asks about alternatives to Google Classroom, including Zoom.
And I don't know if I have the board consensus about having another meeting on June 30th, but I think it's important.
We want to hear. Okay, and let's hear from the other comments, and then we can dial back to that. So, Mr. Gallo.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm in favor of getting this thing underway and starting school for a whole host of reasons on the 3rd. I mean, you postpone and defer, you buy into a whole lot of other issues that we were just briefed on, that is going to raise an entire series of other issues. I think we put a mandate that we ensure students have enough bandwidth, et cetera, by August 3rd to get distance learning to be effective. That would be my direction as a school board member. Now, I think I hear a lot of in-betweens. And I've heard people on every end of the spectrum here, parents, teachers, etc., from distance learning, all distance learning, and for a variety of reasons. They may be themselves at risk. They may have family members at risk. And hence, no matter what, they're not prepared to come back to school. And I, for one, am not going to force somebody to come back to school if they don't feel safe to do so. So that just means that I think until a vaccine or people feel safe, you need to at least provide a distance learning option for our teachers and students now, and for probably the foreseeable future. And this just means that we're going to have to manifest classrooms a bit differently logistically. We should identify what teachers fall in the various categories. Some fall in the category of the distance only, they feel at risk, and we shouldn't place them at risk if they don't want to be, if they feel they are and don't want to be. So classify those teachers. I'm sure we can match students whose parents and themselves feel the same way, and we have a complete distance learning environment. Now, I've heard the other side. They would love to have their kids come to school. They're not concerned about the virus. There's teachers that feel that way, and there's parents that feel that way. I'm not sure we're quite prepared to do that yet, because quite frankly, the governor has a whole lot to say about that as to what restrictions and requirements that we're going to need to be meeting. So that brings the hybrid plan in place, which is a combination of distance learning and on-site learning. That to me is the most difficult and probably the most stressful on students and teachers. And when I just look at the double preps and all of the different ways that they would have to incorporate into their lesson plans and curriculum. And I think another option on the hybrid is figuring out how you can standardize a day for a week, basically, for each student. And, they come in on the same days, the same times during the day. Their distance learning is specified hours at regular times. I mean, I'm hearing varieties of distance learning times, no set schedules. That just is almost chaotic, if you ask me. And so I think what I'm saying is that we should really be flexible on how we actually roll this out. Again, some may want distance for the whole next year. Some may want distance for a little bit until they can prep their classrooms and get ready to come into school. And I think that we really should, poll our teachers and poll our parents, as Danny mentioned, to see who feels comfortable doing what. There's like basically three options, right? You're either full distance, you're something in the middle, or you're full on site. And I'd love to hear, see what percentages everybody falls into and what piece of the pies are. And I think you could probably match teachers with students that would fit in all three of those categories. Now, that being said, starting off school in a total distance learning environment without having teachers meet their kids, like they did when they came and picked up computers, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we know how to do that safely. I would propose that even if we go with a full distance learning thing right up front, that we may consider having a time to over a week period or so of the first week from August 3rd to whatever, the 10th, to have teachers be able to meet students personally hand out materials, come to school, keep in appropriate social distancing, et cetera, for those students that wish to do so, because I think generating and creating that relationship is really important, especially as new students roll into new classes and only see somebody on a TV screen is not exactly a connection. And I know that many teachers are advocating that position as well. And just to be clear, the teachers union didn't, to my knowledge, say this is the specific way we want to roll this out. They're just saying they'd like to keep with the August 3rd calendar in whatever form that we roll this out in. And so I was not aware that the teachers unions and others have weighed in on the methodology and approach for how we're going to roll this out. Like I said, there's a lot of hybrids here. And when it's appropriate, I'd make the motion that we adhere to the August 3rd calendar, but still keep flexibility open for how exactly we may roll this out, and to do surveys, as Danny mentioned, on parents, and as we're currently going through on teachers, to see what camp that everybody kind of falls into. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. I just want to remind us, I don't know, somebody or volume is up, but we did, the last week's presentation was about exactly what you were sharing with the rolling out and the percentages of who wanted to do what. But again, I think our biggest concern was the safety factor of how to bring them back physically as well. So the calendar date is what's at discussion right now too, but they did give some of those options.
Yeah, but what I'm suggesting, and that was a one size fits all thing. And we didn't make a recommendation or proposal on that. No. And I think it's a mistake to assume everybody's going to fall into that particular option that was presented. Right. I think we should make accommodations for individuals' needs. We say we care about people.
Dr. Menard,
that means we care about teachers, we care about students, and we ought to figure out how we can best support them in whatever camp that they fall.
Right. Dr. Menard, can you shed a little additional light on what those options and clarifications? And I do recall saying that, the parents are going to have options. So I want them to hear that and make sure that that's what we did say.
The parents as well as the staff will have options. What is happening right now is there's a letter that's being developed. It should be in the mail by Tuesday of next week, going to all of our families where we are, and it's a questionnaire asking them for each one of their children in their household. Are they interested in a distance learning model for next school year, or are they interested in a blended model? And if they're not interested in either one, then they would put a comment in there. The reason we didn't give a traditional return is our schools don't have the space to be able to house all of our students at the same time and still do the 6-foot distancing. But we also know that the fill-in blank for any family that's interested in that will provide us that data. So that's going out by next Tuesday with an envelope for our families to return those questionnaires to our enrollment center, because we know that there will be people housed there that then we can upload all that data into our ARI system. And for any parent that would prefer to complete the questionnaire digitally, they will get a link or a QR code also in the letter from Dr. Volkemer with the same information. So we're collecting that by student district-wide. For any family that we do not get information from with this first crossover of the questionnaire, then we will be able to create reports to give to our school principals, and then they can work directly with any of their families to fill in any of those missing pieces. On the employee side of the work, our human resource department, in conjunction with our IMT, will be surveying all of our employees to find out similar information, who needs to, because of medical needs or any other concerns, can return, cannot return, all of that data. So we are working through that to get that data. So then we have, we can do that matching that both Mr. Gallo has referred to, and I believe Mr. Tillman referred to that at the last board meeting. So in the data collection of that.
What I recommend is that you be very explicit and ask if they would want any one of the three, not just leave it as a default if you want to enter in, if I want to see a full on-site thing. I want to know what that is, and I want the question asked so that they can answer it directly. And you'll know how many people fall in what camp. If you leave it out, you're leaving 1/3 of the question unanswered, and you're expecting somebody just to put it in a remarks column or something. I think the questionnaire needs to be modified to add all three of those. Otherwise, you will not get an accurate representation of the data.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Okay, Ms. Rosales Medina.
Yeah, so my concern, of course, when I even posed this question on social media and asking, I both had many parents, many educators who have children in the district. And so you get half and half. You have those teachers that want to start on the start date of August the 3rd, and then you will have those that want it later on with educators, and then plus with parents, same thing. You have a mixture of both. My concern was always that if we're going to start with having students enter school August the 3rd, that's why my push was to push it back. Then we're not ready, and I don't feel that I'm confident enough to feel that we're ready to start then and there. Now, that's why I asked for the presentation when they presented it, and that's why I've been asking for this, is to have an idea what are they going to do. So my understanding was that they would start August the 3rd, all virtual. I understand, Danny, what you're referring to. That was the only reason why I'm more in agreement to start August the 3rd, was because they were going to have it virtually in the beginning, which would be maybe 2 weeks, a month. I don't know what that would look like, but I think it's 2 weeks. Then they would move into hybrid and having started, the soft opening, having students come in. That is what I support. But if they're going to have it where they're going to have the hybrid in the beginning, then I wouldn't support it, because I don't think we're there yet. There's too many things that we need to catch up on. And also one of the concerns educators have, the teachers, is like, what is the classroom going to look like? Are they going to move out desks? Many of them have shared with me that they prefer the desk stay in the classroom, and that if they have, they know which items to remove, then they would be putting the request. But so all of that conversation, has that been in play?
And put a bag over the chair.
Right. Yeah, bag over the chair or something like that. But I know that educators don't know what the district's plan is, but that is definitely one of the recommendations, to have it as is, and then request if they need things moved. But my whole point is, if we start virtually, that would make sense. But if we do hybrid in the beginning where students are coming in August the 3rd, I think that's it's too soon. And if we need to have another conversation, have more input, I do agree that we need more surveys. We need to have surveys that will show us exactly what it looks like. And then I'm curious to know the calendar committee. So does it consist of parents, or it doesn't consist of parents?
Abigail, I did check on that, and all parent groups were contacted to be on the committee. But I found out that nobody came to the meetings. They had, I think, 3 meetings, but every parent group in the district, the large parent groups, obviously, they were contacted to be on the committee.
Okay. And then also with regards to having all the unions that's supporting it, like I said, I know that within those groups, there's many that do not agree with the start date. I'm just saying that if we start August the 3rd, then the idea is to push the hybrid model, later in the month, or if not, depending, either 2 weeks or a month out, that they wouldn't start hybrid. They wouldn't start the hybrid in the beginning once school starts. I think we're not fully prepared for that. And I believe many teachers feel the same way. The current concerns are for student safety, for staff safety, educator safety, and parents who are coming in, making sure that we're fully prepared to do that. And so that's my, if they're gonna pass it August the 3rd, having it hybrid in the beginning, then I would be really concerned and may not necessarily support it.
Ms. Medina, just to be clear, the hybrid is not being recommended to start at the beginning of the school year. In the presentation last week, the earliest that we thought that we can have all systems in place and everything ready would be September 28th, and that's the earliest that we think. And that's pending, that's assuming that everything runs exactly the way it needs to, all PPE arrives, and that the health concerns around, the guidance from our governor and from our local county does not say that even if we're ready on the 28th, that we can't, right? So we just are constantly monitoring. We heard in our public comments that there has been spikes, and we're all watching. But there was never a recommendation to start the first day of school in a blended model. We're not ready to do that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. But I also do see where parents may started working, individuals may have started working, then providing that opportunity. Remember what we did in those organizations that were able to do childcare, still look at that for the younger children up to the age of 11, and still providing that for parents as the means right now while they're doing this.
Yes, and we still have those available. Absolutely.
Okay,
And
great.
just,
Thank you.
just quickly, in terms of your question around furniture, not sure where, I've heard that the teachers were concerned about that. I remember being a teacher and being very, my furniture was very important to me, especially when I finally got all my chairs matching.
Right.
So we have no intention of moving furniture out. We met with our managers today, and I emphasize that that is not a necessary use of time. So we are telling everybody, do not move furniture. You do not need to move furniture. That is just not where we need our custodial staff spending their time on moving furniture. So I'm glad you brought that up. For anybody who is listening right now, that has never been part of the guidance. I'm not sure where that came from, but it's not in the guidance now. We have recommended not to move it.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosales Medina. And again, thank you, Dr. Menares. We definitely needed to make sure we had that clear. Dr. White, I believe you're up next.
Thank you, Madam President. And I probably have to echo a lot of what my colleagues have already said, so I'll try to not repeat many of the things they've already stated, because I do agree with most of their comments and their opinions on starting back. Glad Danny brought up Zoom, because I have heard from some of our staff and teachers, and Zoom definitely, in my own opinion, and what I've seen, what I've worked with, is a much more user-friendly platform that has a lot more accessories to it and tools for our teachers, especially since we're going to be starting with distance learning. And Dr. Menares, thank you for clarifying that. I mean, we got hit with a lot of information last week, and have to go back and even look at some of the presentations just to make sure we're accurate with our information that we're saying, because it was a long night, as we all remember, and a long morning. So it sounds like we'll still be on distance learning, and I want to make sure that until September 28th, if that's correct. And then that's a tentative date, even at best, for hybrid learning and teaching. So I think we're all in agreement that August 3rd obviously is a distance learning model completely, but I also am in agreement with a lot of my colleagues have already spoken in regards to parent input and parent surveys and just their participation as well. I also believe that, we need to really find out, and maybe we already know this already, of how much of our workforce is ready to return to the workplace as well. I know we have a lot of staff who have underlying conditions, or for whatever reason, they fit one of the categories for, being at high risk, whatever it may be, or childcare. So those are all concerns, as well as what is our capacity with our workforce coming back, August 3rd. And I know a lot of our teachers have voiced, if they're still doing distance learning, those that, are willing and want to physically report to work to their classrooms, would like to teach out of their classrooms for distance learning. So, I think that's a great idea, and a model I support. But definitely, along with my colleagues, I think we need to go slow here before we go fast. I definitely think we need to start with distance learning, and see what happens in the near future. And be ready for the flu season when it comes. We know that when flu season comes, high risk of second wave hitting us again, which they're talking about a lot now. So we got to be able to jump back and forth if we need to go back to distance learning full model. If we're in the hybrid at that time, we may need to step back. So to keep that in mind as well. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Ms. Rogers, if I can just add something, because I think this is where some of the confusion may lie amongst our employee groups and maybe even with our board. It's that concept of that soft opening that was shared last board meeting. And what does that look like, and how are we going to do that? And let me just share that the intention of the soft opening is this idea of having a small number of children who we know need some additional supports coming into our schools in small numbers. And I'm talking very small numbers. Our schools would figure that out. But what we want to make sure is, how do we create safety nets for our children while keeping our staff and our students safe? Right. And we can stay 100% distance learning, but we all know that there are some groups of children that didn't work for. And so as we build our capacity of our staff to provide even more robust distance learning, because we know they had to jump into this very quickly, finding ways to do the soft opening. So today we had our first meeting with our SBTA negotiations, and we just started an initial dialogue around soft opening. And it's very clear that we're going to develop common definition, common expectations around it, and how do we meet that double goal of keeping students and staff healthy and safe while providing educational opportunities for the children that we know need that, because the distance learning on its own was not enough in the spring. So we will come to a resolution. I have complete confidence in the negotiations. I have complete confidence in our teaching force, because I know that we have the answers. So we just sat down at the table to start that conversation. I think that's where the confusion lies. But I just want the board and our community to know that the intent behind the soft opening is to really just have a safety net for the children that we know need a bit more than digital teaching and learning. And we'll figure out what that looks like and what that sounds like prior to getting into the hybrid. So I hope that helps the board to understand. I think that's where the misunderstanding took place.
Thank you, Dr. Monarez, as well as the making sure that everyone's clear that the planning is continuing on. And when I hear the 28th or whatever date that is, I caution again for us to know that we don't know if we will be ready. I mean, it's a date, and I almost is like, why do we even put it there? But I get it. You're aiming towards something, but we just have to be very clear. That's why we're back at the table again today. Safety will trump everything. And if it's the 30th when safety happens, it won't happen on the 28th. So that just has to be clear. And we need to let our teachers and everyone know that everyone is going to be involved in this planning, because they are the ones that are going to have to be on the front line doing the work. So I hope that that's the message that's being clear, that we're going to err on the side of safety, and then we're going to err on the side of making sure who's going back. So there's a lot of things. I agree with you, Mr. Gallo. There's a lot of things that still has to happen. And I don't believe the 28th might even be that day. So that's just my thoughts. Dr. Hill?
Thank you, Madam President. And I just want to go off agenda just for a minute, because I saw the names of the retirees in the Sun newspaper today, and just want to say congratulations to the retirees. Barely read it, but the names are there. The other thing, my colleagues have made some interesting comments, and I will not repeat any. I will support the August 3rd day, and I think one of the things we need to be concerned with is we are going back to school one day at a time. August the 3rd may not be what we want it to be, and it may be better than what we want to be. So I think if we focus not only 2021 school year, but one day at a time, I think we would be okay. Now, one of the things that we do in schools, we have for years Some people like Apple, some like PCs. So some like Zoom, some like Google Classroom. Is it possible for us to use, the teachers have a choice, the ones who prefer the Zoom, if it can connect with the textbook and the schoolwork, and it works for them. I understand Zoom has more options than Google Meets, but then I'm sure there's some people who have not tried, who are using Google Meets, which is what Google Classroom, which is going on now, have not. So I don't know if there's a possibility that you could use one of both, but I think it would be good if teachers are comfortable with what they have to do with their students, that we support them as much as we can with that. And again, even when it comes to August the 3rd, my concern is every child is safe and every employee is safe. So that's my top priority. And then I heard someone mention, and I think it was one of the comments last board meeting, about our students getting behind. Well, everybody's behind because it's a nationwide thing. So, we can look at it as everybody's behind, everybody's at the same place. But we'll get there, but we need to get there with safety in mind first. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Dr. Flores?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I do believe, Madam President, that based on what Danny said, that we're directing Dr. Volkemer to survey our parents in terms of getting their input. Is that what you understand?
I believe he asked the question about the input on the calendar date, at whether the parents had, and I believe Tom answered that it was put out there. I don't know what happened as to why. And so the other things that Mr. Tillman is bringing up, very valid, has to do with when we begin to instruct people to enter back into the actual school sites. So I'm trying to keep these two separate, and
Right.
really the board to we have to narrow this down. The 3rd, and if something goes awry, I think, like Dr. Hill just said, we know things can change. But right now we're talking about, this is the date that school will start, so that everyone knows, with Chromebooks and Kajits and all of those things. If we need to add more to it, I'm in agreement with it. If we can switch over to Zoom, I'm in agreement with that too. I think we have 6.5 weeks, something like that, left to go. But again, this would have to happen no matter what. And so we're trying to connect kids back. So I did hear that question, but I also heard that it was opted out there to the parents, and I'm not sure what happened there. And we can warrant more input. And if the board also, I just think we need to make a decision, based on what we know, because we're not.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement to open August 3rd with distance learning. And we don't know the rise of COVID cases. Our county is one of the ones that is rising and rising and rising. And so, we need to make sure that our employees and children and families are safe. And I need to repeat, how are we going to protect our teachers? What if they get sick? They're going to go on workers' comp. How much is that going to cost? Are they going to have to sign disclaimers to, do physical, teaching? Are we going to protect their health? I'm worried about our Black and brown parents, because they are African Americans are 4 times more susceptible to COVID. Latinos are 2 times more. Asians are 50%. And the majority of our population is Black and brown. And so we have a high poverty level. How are they going to be able to, afford healthcare if they get it? I mean, there's other consequences to our decisions that we make as a board. And I really think that, if we start, like Danny said, let's find out who needs more gig, more broadband, Let's, make sure that we find the kids that need devices still. Let's do all of that. Like you said, Madam President, there's 6.5 weeks before we actually start. Let's just, get ready, period, for that. And do what we need to do. So that's all I wanted to restate, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. And then I'll take Mr. Tillman's comments and then we will look for the vote. Mr. Tillman?
Yeah, there's something that's confusing going on. Dr. Menard just said that her proposal was to have some kids on site. And after that, everyone says we agree to do virtual only. So we're not going to address what Dr. Menard is saying, I guess.
She's talking about the soft opening, though, way down the road.
No, she's not talking about, she's talking about the 3rd of August.
No,
Okay,
Mr. Tillman.
let's get clarification.
Right. So we are in negotiations right now with SBTA. We would hope that we can be ready to move with the soft opening because we would have worked through all of that with SBTA within the first week of school. But if we're not ready for that, then we won't do that. Our goal sometime in those first 2 months is to have some way to connect our students and our teachers and our families physically among small numbers.
If it's
My only point was that's contrary to what everyone's been saying in terms of starting. No one said tonight they wanted to do virtual learning and start some of the kids come back on the site on the first week. I mean, I did. I said if you find parents and kids at the match and you can do the PPEs, I think it's a good idea. But I will say again, I'm really saying that we should meet again on the 30th. I'm gonna tell you why too.
We do have a meeting on the 30th. We have one scheduled, yeah.
I thought we went all the way through the end of it.
And is it to discuss?
We will add it if it's not. We will add it. We will definitely.
Because another big item is sports.
Right.
We can't wait 2 weeks to talk about how we're going to address sports. But and what we're doing is chaotic. I'll give you a perfect example. If we continue to have virtual meetings, but at some point you tell people it's okay to get back together, then why are we still doing virtual meetings?
I think we're mirroring what we're saying. That's what we're.
My point is we're having virtual meetings because we know there's a risk that if we come back together, that someone might get sick, and why incur that risk? Mm-hmm. But that's the confusion with all this. The other big part that is complicated in the history of the district, I know at least in the last 25 years I've been here, we've never not have school coincide with parents' work. So the stress in the community, as the governor himself has opened up businesses, people are going back to work. The county has said that all employees have to come back on June the 29th. So now you're forcing parents to find some other way, or I guess to leave the kids at home. I don't know what they're going to do because and it's specific. They're saying you can no longer say that you're staying home because you don't have childcare. There is no option to get paid for staying home because you have kids. And you can't use that as a reason for wanting to telecommute. You can still say you're high risk, but other than that, you'll come back to work. So, and I'm not saying I have the perfect answers, but I am saying there's a strain on parents now because who's going to watch the kids when they go back to work? It's always been, part of it has been when we have to get past the summer, that school, your kids will go to school and they'll be in school while the parents are at work. So we're saying right now, if we do virtual, after we get through the summer, then the parents are going to have to find some other way of having childcare for their kids. And two, I'm real confused about the reason why I want to meet on the 30th, confused about the schedule. To me, parents are looking for a regular school day. We were talking about a 2-hour in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. That's not a school day. You still impacting parents in terms of how do they do that? How does a parent get a kid to school? And you said you have less transportation. So you're really going to depend on parents providing transportation. So how does a parent provide transportation for their student from 8 in the morning to 12, or the other one you guys had on paper was from 1 to 3? Who could do that? So if the schedule is not a regular schedule that exists right now, then I don't know how that works. And I guess that's why I'm looking for more input and realizing we're not going to have the perfect answers, right. But maybe that's what we should talk about. And I'll vote affirmative for this August 3rd start date, knowing that when we come back on the 30th, if Dr. Volkmer comes back and says, I've talked to our vendors, and there's no way possible that we can increase the bandwidth by a certain date, or Janie says if we do it, it's going to cost us another $5 million and we don't have the money. If something like that happens, we need to have the discussion, because
I agree.
I don't know how many of our students use the Khajiit to have access to the internet. Is it a large portion?
Dr. Volkmer.
I don't know the exact percentage, Mr. Tillman. We can find that out for you.
So that'd be another thing we need to go on. If we meet, we are going to meet on the 5th. So on the 5th,
we will make sure that as much as that information is being captured tonight, is very valid, that what you're requesting. But again, all of these scenarios there is not a perfect scenario, and I agree with you. But what I do know, safety trumps it all.
And then
we can't do certain things. We can't do it no matter what we plan for.
And my last point is, in terms of the teachers meeting the students before they come back to school, are we talking about doing that like a teacher conference where you schedule the meeting, or are you talking about having the whole class at the same time?
No, we cannot have the whole class at the same time. That would be not within the 6 feet of distancing. So that's why we've got we just today, when we worked with our site leaders, gave them some parameters around the minimum people who should be on a site team to start this implementation process. And we want the schools to figure that out. We don't have the space, Mr. Tillman, to be able to bring all students back in a safe environment in each classroom.
And then I'll end with, I think if you want anyone to see the light of a school, you're better off doing it sometime in August, because for everything I hear, the virus is going to coincide with the regular flu season, which means if we're talking about September the 28th, it's going to be peaking. So you're not going to have anybody come back to school September 28th. Thank you.
Which is definitely the concern with getting some education versus waiting, forever. So thank you, board, for your comment. Dr. Flores, did you get back on? Okay, you're back on.
I'm back on. I got knocked off.
Okay, so the board, here we are confirming the start date for 2021 school year. Be it resolved that the Board of Education confirms and or amends the start date of 2020-2021 school year. But we're not amending. We're not amending. I'll read that again. Be it resolved that the Board of Education confirms the start date of the 2020-2021 school year as August 3rd, 2020.
So move.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. Let's take a vote. Mr. Gallo.
Aye.
Dr. Wyatt.
Aye.
Dr. Flores.
Aye.
Mr. Tillman.
Aye.
Dr. Hill.
Aye.
Ms. Rosales Medina.
Aye.
Gwen Rogers, aye. Motion approved. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have anything else, Dr. Volkmer. Do you not have anything else to? Okay,
we're good to go. Thank you, board.
Okay, so thank you. We're about to move to adjourn, but I do want to remind everyone, if memory serves us all correct, we're meeting again, because that's what we had agreed to throughout this whole budget and everything. And we will be adding those additional items if need be to report and give us information on what was discussed. I don't see on the agenda that it was being captured, but are you capturing those things, Dr. Menarez? I know you were doing a double duty, so maybe Dr. Volkmer was, but I
have notes as well.
So okay, I have things captured as well. We'll go over it tomorrow morning.
Okay, great.
Rogers, I do want to confirm, board, you are scheduled for June 30th for a special board meeting.
Correct.
And that's because you had the public hearing on the budget tonight. You have to approve the budget on June 30th statutorily. And again, we'll add anything, as many follow-ups as we can to this.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. Is somebody gonna say meeting adjourned, or am I gonna
No,
say?
move to adjourn. I move to
Okay.
adjourn.
All right,
Second.
great. We are moving to adjourn. Thank you all for bearing with us tonight. We appreciate you, and we will see you again in a week. Good night, everybody, and God bless.
Good night.
And
Good
we're
night.
together.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Bye, guys.
Good night.